So, welcome to the Metacurrency Holochain Hackathon, first unveiling of kind of the Holochain prototype proof of concept stage stuff. There's just to acknowledge the state that it's in. Not everything is totally working yet, and I'm sure we're going to uncover more bugs in the process of building on it. But we're at a state where you can actually get the gist of what it is to build on it, and we're thinking that even in the course of this hackathon, some of the remaining pieces that need to be done will be done. So I would normally, in a setting like this, actually have people introduce themselves, except everybody already knows each other because we've been hanging out for a few days and went to a lovely magical tea house with Harlan and a bunch of the other people coming. And so is there anybody you don't know?
I don't know. Who is there?
Online,
What do I know?
we have Hayes from Asheville. And Hayes, is there anybody else going to be joining you over there?
We are. Did you just say is there anybody else? Because this is Brett, also here in Asheville. Hi. It just looks dark.
Cool. And then a guy named Paul Hartzog may join you. I tried to connect you via email.
Yeah, I emailed him back. I haven't heard anything, but I've invited him to come.
Okay, cool.
Who else do we have remote?
Do we have any? Well, we have some people from Vancouver remote, but they haven't joined. Oh yes, they have. Nicholas is on the dev chat now, so they can speak into the room. So we've got people at Decontrol in Vancouver.
Martin, Robert Best, and Noah. Noah just joined.
Right. So we have a couple other people coming in through the Slack.
Through the live stream?
Yes.
Okay. Cool. And then, do we know anything about the timeline for circuit youth joining?
Yes, they are quite easy.
Quite easy. So anyway, we have a few kind of remote satellite mini hackathons happening. One in Ashland, Oregon at Circuit Youth, one at Decentral in Vancouver, and one at Shiny Creek with Hayes in Asheville. And he didn't have a lot of notice, but Tiberius in Montreal was going to see if he could round up some folks too.
Nice.
Cool. So also just want to say something about kind of the structure of the days. So we're going to kind of go at this for a few days. And for those of you that have already been here for a few days and feel like you've already been going at it for a few days, sorry. Or so much the better, because I think there's going to be a lot more energy coming in, especially Tuesday evening. It seems like there's a lot of people wanting to come for the technical dinner, people who couldn't necessarily make it to the hackathon, but are really interested in the more technical conversations about the platform and how it works and how to use it. And there's some people with some fun, strange applications they want to use it for cow networks and stuff. I'm serious, like like
Yes.
yes, herd dog. But each day we're going to have some debrief time at the end of the day around dinner time, maybe dinner prep time, dinner time, to share some reflections and gratitudes and acknowledgement of support or partnership that you're getting from other people, and also challenges, things that you're having a hard time with that you wish worked differently, so we can start to include that feedback. We're expecting. You guys are our first users for this, users as developers. So we need your feedback to make it actually work for people. And I want to do a temperature check. And I don't even know this about everybody who's been here. I don't know everybody's level of experience on things, but it's going to affect how we talk about the tools. So can can you give me like, who's unmuted?
We're getting some feedback.
Hey Hayes, can you mute?
Mute or be muted to you.
So, right, first thing I want to check in on is level of experience on Go. And I want to do a temperature check. So like, if you put your arm out straight ahead, it's kind of, you don't have to do the whole arm. We're not trying to do a Heil Hitler necessarily. That's been brought to my attention, but you know, you can do it from the elbow. But sort of level is you've got a little bit experience, a lot, no experience for Go, for actually like Go development.
We could just turn the hand 90 degrees and then there's,
Okay.
there's
Yeah.
no Heil danger.
What's
All right,
none? Do you don't know what's up and down?
So we have,
What is
no, he still wants to do that
Oh, yeah. There you go. I see.
for programming in Go. Okay.
You wanna check that as well in the live stream because you
Yeah.
cannot see them. So
So,
1 to 5.
Sure.
0 to 5?
0 to 5 scale on Go on the live stream. Experience with Go. Okay, cool. And then with JavaScript. All right. And with Lisp.
No access 1,
On which?
Go.
Go, okay. Okay, and with Ruby on Rails, with Rails development. All right, we have a lot, okay, that's interesting. That'll affect how we talk about this thing. What about DHTs? Like, a little would be, like you've heard of them, you know that they exist. You know BitTorrent is one, but then like actually understanding how they work, like the address, and then like really into gossip protocols.
Experience, like building something with it.
Oh, building would be great, way up on the top
Okay.
side.
Building would like break the thermometer.
Would break the roof, yeah.
Okay.
Hey,
What's up?
Hey,
Hey guys. Hey man. How's it going?
okay, cool. And then finally, blockchain.
and can we hear about any of the remote people on these things too? I'm not-
They're trying to harvest,
Trying to harvest
and
that.
I can't see the,
I can see things coming through the Holochain Hackathon channel on the Scepter, on the Slack. And so we've got Judd saying 2 for Go, 1 for JavaScript, 1 or 0.5 for JavaScript, 4 for Perl. We'll see what other people say. 2 for Ruby on Rails, 0 for blockchain. For Judd.
and then other folks on blockchain, I didn't get the
We're doing a temperature check.
I'm gonna say yes.
experience levels.
Yeah, it's very, he's inviting his tech guys and they have different answers, all of them.
Okay.
That's fine, okay. But it sounded like Ruby on Rails actually hit a little bit of a hotspot for some people, so that may,
That was also crazy Rails.
yeah, so that may change how we talk about this, may be helpful.
That's good.
So the first thing we want to jump into is the basics of how holochains work. And some of you have already been in these conversations, and but a bunch of you haven't. And if we're bringing in any biases about how we think things should work, they probably don't apply. So, because this is a different type of architecture than I've seen elsewhere. So the basic, like if I had to give a one phrase summary, it's a validating DHT backed by individual chains, backed by local chains that are validating authorship. So you have sort of the cryptographic integrity and history of your local signed chain, and those could be even, that could include countersigned things when there's multi-party interactions where multiple people are signing something to their individual chains, and then they're shared through to the DHT using kind of a standard put to a DHT process, except no node accepts the request to put it without running the validation rules that everybody shares. And those validation rules are signed into your chain as well, so that they're hashed. You know that everybody's running the same version of the DNA basically on the chain.
And the validation rules can be anything, right?
They can be very lightweight and minimal. Like if you're doing a Twitter-like thing, you don't have to confirm very much, just that it was actually signed by the person who's posting it. If you're doing a currency or something that involves a bunch of stateful information where you want to make sure somebody is in the correct state to do something, they have the credits that they're trying to spend or something like that, then you may need to do much more complex validation and run through their history and calculate a current status, you know, and
there's some validation which is automatic, it's provided by the platform, but the majority of it would be done as application specific. So you're required to validate the contents of your own entries that are on the chain. But the platform will validate the integrity of the chain and signatures. Right?
yeah, actually, that brings me to the way that the way when I was writing about this last night that I have changed how we talk about this is, like, we've been talking about Holochain a little bit like it's a distributed database. And it's easy to think about it that way because it's trying to fulfill some of those functions. But I'd encourage us to not think of it as a distributed database, because a database you tend to be able to have direct data query type interactions with, you know, where you can just send a SQL command to do a select or an update or, you know, like that kind of thing. And in the scenario of a holochain, all of those things are mediated through the application such that the same actions can happen and do happen at every node. That's the only way the validation can work. The data can't propagate if it isn't happening through the application rules. So this as a distributed database doesn't give end users a direct way to interact with the database. They can only access it through the application. So I've started relating to it more as a data integrity engine for distributed applications, right? And it's really the application part that is also providing a layer of that integrity. So you can't bypass that and interact with it directly as like a database. Or continuity will break, and it's just like in Bitcoin or, you know, a blockchain type system. If you commit something to your chain that doesn't follow the validation rules, everybody else will ignore it, and you've basically forked yourself off into your own reality. That's basically what would happen if you try to go around the application that everybody has.
Like a Trump chain.
Like a Trump chain, exactly, forked off into their own reality. So is that part pretty clear? Are there any kind of clarifying questions about the basic architecture? Yeah.
Just one. How do, like, so assuming that one party has like one chain and then another party has another chain, how do those people reach like consensus about whatever? Like, two people are operating kind of different.
They don't reach consensus. They maintain the integrity of their own state. Just like you know, I don't need consensus from Eric to be in whatever mood that I'm in.
Right.
You know, like to have whatever, you know, have pain in my foot from stubbing my toe or whatever, you know, like that's something that's altered on my state and then is shared or visible in whatever ways it needs to be shared or visible.
But I think maybe that the question would be, it would help to answer with the fact that everybody who's using one holochain starts with the same DNA. You start with the same application definition. Okay. So that's the shared agreement that you all begin with.
Right.
And that's what achieves what achieves the same end that feels like consensus in the regular blockchain models.
Okay.
Yeah.
Can I add something? No?
Yeah.
Yeah. Just you, like if you're thinking of a monetary model like Bitcoin or something,
sure.
There's, like, these guys talk about people countersigning transactions, right? So like if you pay me money, we both sign that transaction.
Right.
And so there is that kind of very local consensus of the two parties who are having the transaction.
Right. That's the part of the design of this first of all, if you're coming in with other assumptions about blockchain, there's many times that people talk about the blockchain or something like that, as if there's one huge monolithic blockchain. Many people actually relate to Bitcoin as kind of the big blockchain that you can do side chains and, commit hash states to that to validate something on a huge public chain. And there's no such thing as a public holochain. Every holochain is private to the people participating on it. Now that doesn't mean that there can't be leaks in that system, right? Where like I, as a node, could serve out a web interface to allow people to query things that I could query or something like that. If there are applications exposed in functions exposed in the application, I could make something else that calls those functions and, serve that publicly. So I'm not saying that the boundaries of information flow are necessarily absolutely securable in that way. But it's very much like, to talk on the internet, you have to get an IP address. To participate in a holochain, you actually have to be declared into that space. The threshold to cross to get into that space may be high or low. It may be that we only let people in that we, have their government documents, passport, citizenship, whatever, they've signed away their firstborn child or whatever. Like it may be a very high threshold for crossing into the shared space, or maybe very low, as simple as just getting it, being able to get an address on the space and bootstrap yourself up with a bootstrap service or something like that. But the idea of thinking about sort of the holochain, like there's people think about the blockchain, isn't the way to think about it.
But if you enter into the system and you're new to it, do you download the state from everyone else?
It depends on how that holochain is sharding, right? So one of the ideas in it being a DHT is that everybody doesn't have to hold everything. You can break things up based on hash addresses and the amount of resilience you need in the network, right? If you think having a dozen duplicate copies of all the data is as big as a neighborhood needs to be for replicating, then you can do that. If you think it's thousands of copies, then you have larger neighborhoods. And so, for example, so far we're only playing with really small apps, like making a Slack team alike kind of thing. And in that scenario, everybody has everything, right? You just get every chat, and we're not even sharding it into neighborhoods. So yeah, you would start gossiping with peers and collecting the data from peers. The other thing that Harlan was referencing, like part of the perspective difference that we're coming from in Holochain is I've taken to calling blockchain and many approaches to distributed computing as taking a data positivist approach, right? As if data exists. It has a truthiness to it,
Or it
out
should
there.
exist.
Yeah, well, it should exist, that it's a reality out there. Like this tokens, the crypto tokens, are they created or not? Have they been spent or not? And that's information that's a truth out there. It's in the case of Holochain, our ontology inverts to, it's all built on the actions of agents. There is no truth. There is just something asserted by somebody at a particular time. Later, somebody else might be able to assert something else that replaces that or updates that assertion or whatever. And that way you're always operating from the point of reference of the data, right? Which is has to do with time and vantage point. And as far as we're concerned, this is much better models how we interact with the world, right? We've sort of given up the idea that there's an absolute frame that, general theory of relativity was published 100 years ago, and we sort of get that there's no absolute sequence of events, that the sequence changes based on your vantage point and how far away things are and how quickly those things move and propagate. And so rather than force a consensus on the vantage point from one particular perspective, which is essentially like blockchain, every time you commit a block, you're saying, we're gonna accept this node's perspective for this segment of the chain as the reality. But it's not the same sequence of transactions anybody else had necessarily, even in particular inside that block. But it was good enough, and they had the hash that met the 13-0 nonce criteria, and therefore they now have the authority to commit that block. And so we're basically having a lottery of whose reality we're going to accept into the chain, rather than be able to deal with the fact that we have different realities. All right. Yeah, so I want to actually get into how do you build this stuff. So people who are remote, does anybody know whether Noah got his thing running? I think I got it making.
Is he on the thing?
Does anybody know what?
Whether
Whether
Noah
Noah-
got Holochain running.
Oh, Noah is in the
Slack?
on the live stream, so Noah, can you answer?
Well, he's in the live.
He would write. He would answer.
He will write
through
answers
text
to
to
text.
Fernanda.
Cool.
Not running yet.
Okay. So there are people that are having problems with getting stuff running, and it almost always seems to have to do with the dependencies on libp2p and gx in particular. And 9 times out of 10 so far, it has been things missing in the hash. One of the troubleshooting things that worked for me was to go to the GX directory and run make in that directory and have it actually be built separately from making Holochain.
Yeah. One experience I
I know
had.
it's still having this problem.
Yeah.
One experience I had that might be useful to people is when I ran make in the Holochain directory, like clone from Git, it didn't work. But when I followed the README instructions and installed it into my Go path, did the go get dance, that worked fine.
Yeah, the go get dance is better at installing dependencies. The make file is supposed to replicate that and force the installation of dependencies, but it doesn't seem to be batting 1,000 there.
Yeah, this has really been our big. It seems to get almost everybody. And the make, I set it up so that it would work on Travis, so it's working fine there. But I don't know why it's not pulling down.
So I want to pretend that you've gotten Go running and you can make the thing, and we're going to come back to troubleshooting those issues if you haven't. Chris, do you have a place that people can see this at all on?
So yesterday, Eric, you talked to me.
Yes, Daisy.
Like,
Sorry.
that's Daisy, yeah, it's good. So the thing, Eric, yesterday you were making, I don't know who it was, I was concentrating, where you can go onto the page and you can send a token to your local line before it goes to your local DHT. Is those the right words? Like,
Bootstrap?
let me look at it. Hang on, and I'll tell you with more detail. You can connect to one of the spun up HCs, send an even number or an odd number. You build that little interface.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that is, I can spin those up on the internet. You click the button and get a hash back. That's
Okay.
exciting.
So one of the things Daisy has been doing to try to help skip this process if people are having problems getting it building on their machine is providing a place where you can make your commits and everything in a Git repo and then enter that Git repo into this web page, and it will go load it, build it, and spawn 5 nodes that can talk to each other all on a public IP server. Also, so we sort of bypass the issues with NAT and all that kind of stuff, because so we'll get to that at the end of this if
And or throughout the
day. But yeah, I'm just saying,
We'll see
I
how
don't want
it
to go into
works.
those level of details right now, but I'm just saying if for some reason you can't get it running on your system, you can still develop and run it on that. So this is a good time to actually look at the README on the repo and the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 steps for running a holochain. And so the first step after you have it making, so this is all after you basically get Go working and the dependencies on libp2p and outside programs. The very first thing you do, so there's a command line service called HC for interacting with the holochain process. And the very first thing you have to do is set up your directories and files and config files and keys that it can use to talk to other nodes and that kind of stuff. You do that with HC init. And by the way, HC help will get you all of these options. HC init, and then in quotes, an email address or some identifying string is what's going to be used just to identify the agent that is spinning up this node. And that sets up your files and directories and that kind of stuff. Are you trying that right now, Harlan?
Yeah.
Great.
It's just occurred to me as well that I can pretty quickly create, if people want SSH boxes to connect to, I can put in, and they want to fiddle when they can't compile, I can do that pretty easily, quickly.
Gotcha. Okay, cool. In an environment where all the Go dependencies are already working and loaded and stuff.
Right.
So this is the kind of thing that you only need to do once when setting up a server, unless you're developing and you keep blowing away those directories because you want to do a reset and make sure that your application is working from scratch. Anytime you blow away the .holochain directory in your user directory, you have to init again. But you shouldn't need to init again after this, just for installing other chains and stuff. So then let's talk about how to install another chain. The next step is to, sorry, let me set up some context. The idea here is that y'all are developers who are going to build something on the system. This is to show you how somebody's going to consume what you build, right? How somebody else actually needs to be able to set it up and go. You will do some of these things again and again as you're building as well, but I'm sort of starting from the end user angle on this, and then we're going to come back to development stuff in a minute. So what you can do, every holochain has unique DNA. You can clone the DNA of another holochain, though. If you do a direct clone and don't alter anything after the cloning, then you will get that identical DNA. You will basically be a part of that other holochain. So if you are taking the Slack team example and you want to create another Slack team, what you do is you clone the previous Slack example, and you can clone it even right from the live directory, right? It's not going to take any of the data over or anything like that. It's taking all the program files and configuration information. You can clone from a live running directory to have another instance, and if you don't change anything, then you're basically creating another node, identical node, which is kind of useless because it has the same ID as you and all that kind of stuff. So if you don't change its keys or identity or anything like that, it is just another node. This is how nodes find each other and identify each other, because they have the exact same DNA. If, however, you've cloned something and now you make some edits to the config file, like you change the name of the Slack team from CoMakery to Core Network, right? You've just changed the DNA of the file. And even if you only changed that name, just that little text string in the config file, it's now going to have different DNA and it's going to spawn a different holochain. And so even though everything works identical to the other one, just the name changes the DNA, because now you're operating in a different space, in a different set of agreements with a different intention. Is that part all clear? It's super clear, right? Super easy. So then you have to actually start the chain. So there's an HC gen, which is like generate or Genesis, and HC gen, the chain name that you just cloned to. Oh, sorry, I didn't really give the grammar of the clone command, but it's HC clone, the source path, and then the target name that you want to give it.
Like if you're in Holochain, example/simple
Example/simple, and then
or dot examples.
right. If you're in the Holochain directory, you can just do /example/simple and clone that, and it's going to create whatever you call it. You can call it foo, bar, baz. You can call it useless numbers, because I mean the simple example isn't really a useful one. It's just like enter an even number, enter a prime number. It's
What would be the most useful thing just to get us rolling?
Cloning the example. Like,
Clutter?
The simple example?
probably
the chat.
Hello, chat.
at the moment would be the most useful.
Well, the clutter one actually also runs a little bit. You can try any one of them,
Yeah, you can do any one of the
or
examples.
do all three of them, and then you can try running all three of them and see what happens.
Okay. So we clone and then you said
Then you gen. So you do HC gen chain is the minimum thing that you have to do. You could also, if you want to make a different set of keys for this later, you can do HC gen keys. So just a technical thing is that the very first entry in your local chain is the DNA entry. So that's part of how you know that somebody else is doing the same thing as you, is they have the same Genesis block, right? That has the same DNA. That's how you know you're operating in the same agreements. The next block is your identity stuff, where you're actually committing your keys and your identity sort of token strings, that kind of stuff that identify you on the network. Because you can't really talk to anybody else until you've done that. So those are the two kind of Genesis blocks in sequence that happen every time you generate a chain. Did that work for you, Harlan? Did you gen chain?
I did a clone and I did gen chain, and no news is good news, so I guess it worked.
Okay, you did the name of the chain, gen chain.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. HC gen chain, and then whatever you had cloned to as your target name.
Yeah, now it says Genesis entries added, DNA hashed, new holochain, starts with QM. Pretty awesome.
Exactly.
Long string.
I could read it too.
Awesome. Nope. Cool. So then you should now be able to run the tests of that chain. So we're encouraging test-driven development. We're using it in Go. So all of our Go things have tests. But every chain also has tests. And are those going to run?
For the example, almost.
Almost.
But there's still some tests which are running right now.
So in the simple, the tests run. In the simple one, the tests run if you do HC tests, and also in the clutter, the tests sort of run. They do. They run.
So you say HC test and then the chain name, and it's going to run the tests for that chain.
So the test suite works. It's just a few tests are not
Passing.
not green.
Yeah. And that's our fault, you're saying?
No, it's like a combination of what's implemented and working right in the DHT around tripping, and so there are whole sets of this stuff which is in very high active development and pieces that don't work. But hopefully, as the week works on, the hackathon will make it work. The clutter is a microblogging.
It's Twitter.
Yeah.
A flock of cats is called a clutter. So.
And cats eat birds.
And cats eat birds.
So it's a distributed Twitter.
Yeah.
The next one.
And we're also sort of maybe being too truthful about our relationship to social media.
Quiver and fear Twitter.
All right, so we made it through tests, and then the last thing would actually be to serve it out and run it, access it through a web browser, a web client.
I couldn't get any of the tests to run. Did you say that's expected?
What happens?
Just no I tried to HC test.
And then the name of
HC test chat test, for example, which I did successfully generate that chain.
So you say
The
HC
chat.
test chat, what happens?
HC test, chat test, which is the name I gave when I cloned and generated the chat test.
Yeah.
And what happens is
Wait, no output means everything's fine.
means they pass.
Yeah, if you want, you can do HC minus debug.
That is strange because there's at least one test that should not pass. Yeah, that's strange.
Nothing happened at all.
You had done simple test, you also did chat test. Okay.
Oh, did you already do gen chain?
Yeah.
You don't need to for tests.
For test, in fact, you can't because I think it'll clear everything. I don't know what it'll do.
Oops.
That's probably going to be an issue.
So maybe that's just reclone. So
If you clone and you do minus force, it will erase on top. Otherwise, it'll give you a. So
Yeah, just make a chat too.
yeah, you can do a chat 2 or you can do minus force. HC clone minus force, and then it'll go on that. So
Override it.
try HC test chat 2 and HC test. So it did nothing. Put the debug in front.
So we need to change
All
that.
kinds of stuff is going on.
Cool. So maybe they're passing.
Expecting output. Yeah, it looks like it's all going.
Sweet. Tests are working.
I think.
Sweet.
And pass.
Okay, but we also need to change that in the README sequence if we need to test before gen change. So in the README, I think it's switched. Okay, so you ready to serve out the chat interface?
Yes. So ready.
So HC serve, chat 2, chat test, chat, whatever you called it. And this doesn't demonize, but you can throw it in the background if you want or whatever. And now you can go to give you instructions, you can go to localhost.
Yes, it's working.
All
I
right.
have a web interface. HTML. Yeah.
Woohoo!
The clutter one's much prettier.
Clutter?
Clutter.
Okay.
To generate the clutter chains.
I like cats.
Oh, good. You'll like this one. Okay, well, that's the basics of how somebody's would get this up and going. And, we could script some of this and that kind of thing, but this is how something ends up running. Any questions about that? No. Anybody who's Panic?
Yeah, when I was gen chaining clutter. But we probably shouldn't stop.
This is where we get to the hack part of
Yeah.
the song.
Okay, so then I want to talk about what it actually is like to build an app. And we are very new at this ourselves. You can see these are the apps that have been built, and they're very lightweight, and we have no idea what the best practices really are for building Holochain apps. But there are kind of three main components that you're thinking of. One is that the app is the heart of it, which, I need to back up and say something about nucleus and that kind of stuff. So, did you want to explain that?
Why don't we let?
I want to do it. Yeah, you want to just explain the nucleus too?
yeah, sure. I don't know, but maybe with a beamer and with some code actually. Maybe with to drive. It's just.
Yeah. Let me just say one thing about the nucleus.
Let's do that.
So the idea is that you can write holochains. Oh, wait, I have to introduce it to some of our weird terminology too. So we already said that a holochain has a particular DNA, right? It's the hash of all the code. And that's how you can tell what's unique. The DNA is comprised of different parts, meaning you can mash code from different things together, right? You could build a new holochain that takes elements of this and elements of this and runs all those parts. And so those parts, those separable parts of code, we are calling zomes for chromosomes, right? Because they are parts of the DNA that are kind of unified wholes. And we have different application engines that can run different zones. So when I asked earlier who had experience with Lisp, we have a Lisp engine. So you can write an application in Lisp. We have a JavaScript engine. You can write an application in JavaScript. We have, Nico was talking about writing a Ruby engine because there's a mini Ruby scripting thing that will also run and go. So we could potentially soon have one running Ruby, but that's not there yet. And we intend to make a Scepter one that actually runs our self-producing semantic trees and that type of stuff. So if you want to program in those things. And what we call that application engine for those things is a nucleus. So there's a JavaScript nucleus and a Lisp nucleus so far. I think that's all clear. And so one of the things that has proven useful for Nico in working on the chat app is thinking of this in a Railsy model view controller way. And he's going to share that. Do we need to power that up?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're a Railsy people.
That's awesome. Arthur, Hayes says this stopped working.
So
That was a long time ago.
Close that window and reopen it.
He said the video stopped. I don't know if that was audio as well.
Did Hayes have access to the live stream?
Yeah, that's what he did. He switched back to the live stream.
Okay.
So we have the video off, it looks like.
It looks like this thing is not even, it looks like
No,
you're,
it defaults to video off or whatever. You can just click.
it hasn't even,
So close the whole browser and close the other. Was that?
it's working now.
Close the other tab. What's the other tab? Gmail.
Yeah, I think this is working now.
No, something's muted because it's red. You have to unmute the red thing, whatever the red thing is on, because the icons aren't showing up. All right. So Hayes, can you hear us through the live? Through the Hangout? Okay.
Okay. Oh, good. You have
Yeah,
that.
maybe put my laptop on this.
I think they're bright.
Share now.
Can people can't.
So, oh yeah, can you remote guys see that? The code?
Probably not. It's probably going to be
No.
too small.
You know what we could do is you could
Throw a whiteboard in front of it.
we can let's
I can
also
let me make it a bit bigger.
if you can jump onto the live stream.
Oh, that's right. And then share your screen.
Share your screen.
Can either jump onto the live stream or jump onto the,
Right.
at least jump onto the Hangout.
Right.
And then,
No.
yeah, the Hangout. And so at least people on the Hangout can see the code.
But I don't have the Hangout link. I only have
The address.
Go to
Okay.
scepter.org/devchat, right?
Scepter
You're
or
not supposed to say that aloud on the live stream.
Oh. No, that's okay.
so what was it?
Scepter.org/devchat.
Oh.
Or
DevChat coming right up. And then you can share your
you can
screen.
share your screen to them. But you're going to want to mute your microphone and speakers so that you don't get
Yeah.
feedback.
Oh, no, that didn't work.
No, never done hangouts in the same room as somebody else. Okay, well, you don't have to let it do a screen share instead of phone. So there's a join
No.
button, a green join button down below.
Yeah. Got it.
Alright, and then is are your speakers muted on that device, on your laptop?
Sorry?
Are your speakers muted on your laptop?
Yes. No.
Awesome. And you probably want to mute the mic so they're not getting two mic pickups.
Right now it's not responding.
Due to the number of participants in this video call,
You might be
Nah. Let's do it.
Did you get it?
No, it crashed.
Crashed. Ah, yes.
Hmm,
I think you should open a few more tabs.
maybe.
Tab shaming.
Ah, I think it was Little Snitch.
Yes. Little snitch.
I didn't see the Little Snitch one now. There it is.
Yep, there you go.
Okay.
Now show your screen.
Cancel upper
Where was
left,
that?
upper left. The green arrow thing. Yeah, that
Ah,
one.
okay. Okay. Good.
Not really scary.
Is it working?
Yeah.
Is it sharing?
No, now you unshare. You need to do.
Yeah.
Oh no,
Is
it's
that
just
everyone?
your screen sharing. Right. Yeah. Right, because now we have a nice, good infinite regress.
Right.
Ah, right.
Cool.
So can you see my screen shared?
Hey,
The Hangout?
yeah, great.
Good.
Alright.
Okay. So then I can maybe make it a little smaller again. Yeah? Okay, nice. Okay, good. So what you see here is the chat example that Art was talking about, that we have been working on the last days. And maybe I'll just walk you through the directory structure a bit in order to make my point with the Railsy approach. So the DNA JSON file that you see here right now is like the manifest file. That's the main entry point and where you register other files and the name of the application and version, ID string, and so on. And so I want to talk about the properties and what you see here right now. I just want to scroll down a bit. And what you have here then is a zones object. So
Let me just interject one thing. You're seeing this file as a JSON file, but you can also structure this stuff as either YAML or TOML, depending on your choice.
yeah. Okay, so what I have here is a list of zone entries. And where to cut to the point, I look at zones as being something like the controllers in Rails. So I think you said before, zone comes from chromosome. And so for every zone, you define a code file in which the code for the zone is being held. And right now there are two implementations, JavaScript nucleus type and a Zygo Lisp-like nucleus type. And I've used JavaScript here. And I have actually 4 zones. One chat zone, which is like the main, the main application controller, if you will. And then I have 3 zones which are named according to the models I have in this application. So rooms and messages and profiles. And what you see here inside of the zone definitions is also an entries list where I register the schemas for the models that I'm using in the zone.
People are asking if we can screen share instead.
It is screen share.
It is.
He's screen sharing, but
But-
he's only screen sharing in the
Not
dash
in
chat.
the
He's not
live
screen sharing in the
stream.
live stream.
So okay.
He's not on the computer that's recording the live stream.
Right. So
And
they
you
need to
cannot
go to
open
the
it there.
Can we move that?
So maybe
I'll move it closer. I'll try to get.
Closer would help.
I can
Can
also
that computer get on dev chat and share his screen?
increase the font size a bit.
Well, it's the live
The live chat is coming through the video.
stream is a different thing that's recording and not the.
Right. Okay, I'm gonna.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Just, do we have something to set it on?
The thing that Nico's computer is on is the best thing. Maybe you could swap where the two computers were or there.
Yeah.
Here, how about?
Oh, there, that's actually better.
Sorry.
Live streaming can't be shared around.
You can, but he's not on the live streaming computer.
Right, so live streaming computer share his screen and it connects to dev chat.
Wait, no.
We can have two hangouts.
That's probably good.
Well, maybe then I can also put my laptop there. It would be nice.
Is it backwards? You have to reverse it now.
Let's ask people who are watching the stream if it's backwards or
Does the
forwards.
screen, is the text showing up backward? No, it's showing up right. You can see it. This is perfect.
Okay,
Okay, nice.
and I'm actually gonna raise that up a bit.
They're clear.
Looks good.
Yeah, gold.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, nice. Okay, so to look at this first example for rooms. So I have a rooms zone, which code is defined in this zone rooms.js file. Thank you. That's better. So this entry is connecting this zone rooms.js and this schema room.json. So this is kind of like the model definition, which I have here, schema room. So which is defining the structure of the this model type, and the the zone rooms file is the controller for this. So similar to Rails, where you have user model and users controller, and I don't know, post model and posts controller.
Can I say something about that real quick? So one of the things is that there for every type of thing that you're going to create on your chain and or propagate on the DHT, there's an entry definition that right now we're typically using JSON schema language for defining the entry definition, but one of the underlying things that that the system does for you is validate that schema, making sure that you're actually using the data structures that other nodes are expecting and know how to validate and know how to work with. But in order for those nodes to do that, if they encounter that somebody's trying to share a chunk of data that's a particular type, they need to know which entry type it is to know which validation rules to run on it. So that's why there's this file is part of what makes explicit which zones are handling which things for the whole distributed system.
And that was what made it click for me at some point. I mean, first it felt a bit awkward to me that we had this discussion that you have to define these schemas, because I was more thinking in like an IPFS style of having a heap and just pointers to objects. But this is a more structured approach. So, I mean, Art said before that this is not a database, but or you explained it before as a database and now as the whole application. But for you as the application developer, the holochain that you are using, on which you are sitting on this abstraction level, to you is like a database. That's the best way to approach it. So, so you define in these schemas, you define your models and the structure of your tables, if you will. So of your models better. And in your controllers, you can use them in a similar way as you would do it in an MVC Rails-like framework. So and that is actually
Okay.
that is actually, I think it's a very nice idea to, and we also just talked about this, to at least make it possible to have a framework which is very similar to Rails, but it's just decentralized. So you have the same style of building the application, but instead of having a centralized database backend, well, you just don't need that. But it's exactly the same way of thinking about the application. That's quite nice. So maybe to have a look into these, into a zone. Maybe we take the messages. Yeah. So, so what you do in your zone, you can just create functions, JavaScript functions, and then you use this built-in expose function to make it available to the outside, to the user interface. I don't know if it makes sense to go through the details of this example now.
Well, I don't know about the details, but I want to just say that there's the things, the three sort of domains I think you're focusing on when writing an app is what you have to expose to the user interface. So what UI services you have to provide, and then the user interfaces are pluggable. Like you could have one that views all this in VR goggles and that kind of thing, or another one that views it and as really boring Courier font tables or something, like whatever you want. But you have the user interface has to have these functions that you expose to gain access to the services and to commit data and all that kind of stuff. It accesses all the database through your functions that you expose. The other layer is the data layer, right? So the schemas give you the structures, right, as if they were sort of like the fields in a table or something like that. But you still need to perform some of the data integrity actions that you would normally count on a database to, like.
Why don't you scroll to the validation rule in there?
I was actually thinking of like the put meta, like when you commit something and then we do the put metas, like when you commit a post and we do the put metas and stuff.
Well, that's not validation. That's actually action.
No, I didn't say validation. I'm saying data integrity.
Oh, okay.
So what you do here is you commit a message to your local chain, which automatically does a callback to the validation rules so that you don't commit something, you don't cryptographically sign that I'm doing this thing that turns out to be an illegal thing. Like you actually run yourself through the validation rules before it gets committed to your chain. But then you put it to the DHT. Put is our basically published to the DHT command, which, by the way, in the future, like at the moment, we're just putting the whole thing, but in the future, there may be a way that you only publish partial entries and you do Merkle proofs on the leaves that you want to keep private. Too much detail. Anyway, put meta. This is the other part of the kind of relational integrity that I wanted to point out to. So hash tables are this huge sparse space that have no relational connections between them. So our DHT not only runs validation rules, but allows you to do a weird thing of basically putting a meta tag on a hash that exists in the database. So the room already exists that you're posting this message to. And so what you do is not only put the message out there in the DHT, but now you hang a tag on the room saying, I'm adding this room to this message. And so it does just a little bit of relational linking, because now when you pull up the room, you can say, give me the list of messages that have been posted in this room.
This is a little bit like going back to the Rails example. This is the way in which in the distributed world, what you are getting is the thing of joining together two models.
Joins, yeah.
So where you have a join that would say like, how is it in Rails? You say like, you do the mapping when you're defining your model. Yeah, as many as one-to-one. This is kind of the equivalent of how you get to do that in the distributed world by attaching a particular arbitrary tag of a type on the thing that you want in the DHT, because then you can do get meta to pull back the collections of things that have been so tagged.
And so, can you name those 3 arguments to put meta?
Oh, we should bring up the if you go to the wiki, there's the
API.
there's an API docs place that has all of that. And it's pretty up to date. I keep working on that. So the first one is a hash. The second one is a hash. The third one is a tag. So the first one is the hash of the thing that you're attaching to.
Commenting on.
The second one is the hash of the thing that you just committed.
Sure.
Because you can't commit data to it. You can't attach data. You can only attach data that you yourself have already put of some type into your own chain. And then the last is the tag.
Sort of like subject, object, predicate, or if the predicate was like has message.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So this thing will become a message in relation to this. So, or the other way around, this thing has messages, and one of them is this object.
So just one other quick thing, the puts, you're always just putting a hash, because what a validating DHT does in this case is it says, oh, you want me to add this hash? And then it asks you back for all of the information it needs to validate that you've signed it, that it's on your chain, that it's, they may need to ask you for your whole friggin' chain to see that you're in the state to do it. So rather than try to make the put protocol send all of that stuff with it, we're just have the put protocol send the hash, and then it lands in somebody's validation queue. And when it comes time for them to validate it, then they ask for the data they need to validate it using their copy of the same app, right? So they send back a message to the author saying, give me this information from your chain.
You told that story, and you told it starting from the middle of the story. Can you tell that story from local chain, push to DHT, node share?
Yeah, because in this case we have the commit to the local chain. So I'm saying I want to post a message to the Slack saying, hey, I'm excited, everybody's here for the hackathon. I commit that to my chain, and in just want to underscore in question that you asked earlier. Why should I want anybody's consensus? Why do we want to have consensus about whether I should commit that to my chain? So that's a thing of I'm altering my state, and it's embodied in an immutable way in my state. And part of what makes it immutable is that the next thing that happens is that it gets shared. And so if you need to be tracking that things have happened out there, you can track that. In any case, the next thing I do is I put it to the shared space. So I write it to my space. These validation rules run when I do that. Now I just say, hey, I'm publishing this key, and it's the hash in my chain that I'm publishing. And then the nodes that receive that put request, they say, okay, they put it in their queue to validate. And when it comes time to validate it, they say, okay, there's 2 protocols basically being spoken on the network. One is the DHT node protocol. One is the source protocol. So am I addressing your chain, or am I addressing your shared DHT cache kind of thing? So when a node receives this put request and it goes in their validation chain, they then respond over the source protocol saying, give me the information that you actually committed to your chain and whatever information I need to validate.
That's what's going on under the hood.
Yeah. And then we make the association, because this has to exist in the DHT for then us to link those things in the DHT.
And so if it validates, they basically say, yep, this checks out. When I checked it, it worked.
Right.
It checked out for me.
Oh, and by the way, it's completely possible that there could be a situation where both of these things don't validate, where somebody says, make me an admin, and put this entry about me being an admin to the DHT, and then when they go to associate with the chain ID that they're an admin, the put meta could fail because only admins can promote admins or something like that, right? So that would mean they've published information about me being an admin, but then they can't actually attach it to the place where the logic pulls that data later to see who's actually admins for that thing. So this is not an atomic transaction, right? Parts may go, and it's not even a synchronous transaction because it's a DHT. So it's asynchronous.
I feel like we should sort of stop and get temperature check or just see where people are, what questions need to be asked, and like just stop talking for a little bit unless there's something else you wanted to add about the view of looking at this through the sort of Rails lens.
It was really helpful, by the way.
The piece missing for me is we haven't gotten to the validation rules yet.
Right, validation and test is maybe the two pieces we should.
All right, so that's great. So why don't you move on and show some of the validation code? That would work.
Do you still want to get temperature from other folks?
Well,
or,
I mean, we should just see if there's any questions at this point before we move on, and give the online world just a chance to do that.
And we're going to look for.
And Hayes, I'm looking at Hayes on the, if there's anything coming through the chat there.
He's saying
Hayes is feeling good.
he's been doing Rails development, so he's happy about the Rails analogy.
In the meantime, one thing I'll say is that I didn't think of having a zone for every entry type, right? That, I mean, when we were building this, we assumed that you would associate a bunch of different models with one code base. Again, we don't know what the best practices will turn out to be. Maybe it turns out that that's what you pretty much always do, or maybe sometimes you clump a bunch of entry types per zone. You'll see the difference if you start looking at the sample code. You'll see that most of the time we were doing a bunch of them.
Files are cheap. We can afford a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, next to the long file that emerged when we put all these functions into just one zone, what was getting messy is the validate function. I mean, which is now, because we are still developing, it's just simple, just returning true. But if you have everything in one zone file, then you would need to have a big switch or many if statements here in order to find out which entry I'm getting here and how to check if this entry is valid. So breaking it apart into these controller-like sections also eases this piece. These two functions, Genesis and validate, are callback functions which are called by the Holochain. So Genesis is called once per Holochain instance, so once per node. So
right after the two Genesis blocks have been added.
Yeah. So what you can do there is setting stuff up. So I mean, we had something here before in the application.
You could look in Clutter. There's an example in Clutter.
Oh,
if
nice.
you want.
Okay.
I think try zone clutter.js.
Genesis. Okay. So what does this do?
So this one gets it gets the ID of the holochain. So property is another function that's available. It spits it out to the console because you have a debug thing that's available. And it calls the add profile function, which is defined above with some parameters. And then it puts meta that onto the main ID of the holochain. This is similar to what you had seen before. But this does it at Genesis time, basically saying, I have joined the clutter space. I'm going to clutter things up a little bit.
So this is actually a nice trick in order to have something like global variables, or to have like these table-like associate collections at all, because I mean, what we saw before is put meta onto a specific hash, onto a specific object. But how do I get all objects of a certain kind? I need to have one point where I start from. So, and what is happening here is that with property _ID, we get the hash of the first entry of the holochain, the chain. So the entry which holds the DNA, which of course is the same for every for every node. It's part of the chain. So that is kind of the app, and we just use this hash as our the space on which we put our users that we want to have accessible globally in this application.
Arlen looks like he's got a question.
Yeah.
So we're adding a profile which is off screen.
That's the same as the commit that he was doing before. You can just see it
So
right
we're adding profile, which is committing to the thing.
It's only-
We're getting back a hash. That hash is stored in K in line 25. And then we're putting meta, we're saying the ID of the chain, we're associating this profile's key with the metadata users. So this is one of our users.
Yes.
Every profile that's added will be in this thing.
Yeah.
And it's exactly this cool thing that you can do if you use the DNA as one of your hashes, and that's how we get basic identity.
Right, bootstrap.
Exactly. So every user announces themselves as a user attached to as metadata on the PHD.
And this is in the zone clutter genesis, which runs once after the chain is geneticized.
Yeah.
Genetic.
On your
Exactly. When
Generated.
Genesis.
Yeah. So once for every node, for every installation of this application.
So
yeah.
So there's only one agent that ever gets added by this Genesis function? There's
You.
only one profile?
Yourself.
No,
Yeah.
when you set up a new instance, you're going to join this Twitter clutter thing.
Remember when you did HC init?
Yep.
You
Not
added
always.
in, you typed in a name.
That's my agent name.
That property is your agent name.
So this is the creator of the chain.
Yeah.
And
Of
Your train.
No, this is your. You
my
think of
node.
it as,
Okay, my
as
node.
your account.
You.
Yeah, so
It's
you-
the creator of your chain.
Because
how do you know?
your local source chain.
All right.
And Art, when he sets it up and does this, it'll create his local source chain.
It's like a distributed system, except distributed.
And now we see the value. Yes, finally.
Wait, just,
That one, please tweet that.
Just a note, a bookmark for later for ourselves. Because because ID is so overloaded,
Yes.
we may want to make it underscore DNA or something, right? If it really is the hash of the DNA, like.
Yeah, actually, so this is going to be this is a request to everybody, even online, that a lot of these names are probably not the final names for a lot of things. And Arthur has been complaining about ID, and I just recently changed agent name. Agent name. It used to be agent ID, so it was like ridiculous. And name is probably not the right word either, but it's like identifier or string. And actually, what we would like to do is make it so that when you are committing your initialization, there's a bunch of properties, and you could pull out the sub properties of that agency, because then you could have first name, last name, email, whatever, public key.
But what part of what we're doing right here is basically saying add a profile, create an entry that.
Right, and I'm just using the agent name as the nickname.
Yeah.
I would maybe argue for adding a function application or application hash or something. So instead of property ID.
Yeah. Because these are, okay, we should talk about the properties, because one of the things that you can do, and you showed this originally, go back to the DNA.
This one? Or?
Yeah, just any DNA will do. You have, actually at the top. So with any DNA, you can set properties. And these properties are what's available through property. Except that those underscore ones are special ones, and we probably should split that out into two different things. And the reason for having these properties here is so that if somebody clones a chat, you can have like the name of the chat inside of here. You can have a separate whole Slack-like instance. Maybe we should do that. We should show it inside of the chat.
The
right?
chat, yeah. What we have here is,
Right.
for instance,
So the name, purpose, language, initial admin, you had other things in there. So this just makes it easy for users not to have to code that down in the code, but to be able to just customize it when they go running it. Yeah, we should do that. I think you're right.
So it's really tricky, the way that you were thinking about, like, the person who started the chain, right? It's really a way of thinking, and we find ourselves, but it's really almost impossible to do except to encode it into the DNA that, like, that initial, like Chuck Norris is the initial admin or something like that, right? Because you don't know who, when you're spinning up a chain, you don't know, am I the first ever?
Right.
You know, or am I the millionth? You know, do I win the door prize?
Right.
Because each one is just a full peer.
Right.
So.
Distributed, but it's distributed.
It's like distributed, but it actually is.
Matt already tweeted it.
I gave that.
Okay, so we got Genesis. Now validate. So maybe just for now I remove this one here and this one maybe. So this validate gets called on every entry that is either newly created locally or that is getting pushed onto my chain from the DHT, right?
No,
Correct me if
nothing get pushed to your chain, get pushed to the DHT. So if you're acting as a DHT node and somebody sent you a put, you're gonna call validate.
Okay, it's called on everything that shall be added to my chain, either from a commit that I'm doing or from some. No, I'm sorry.
Things that come into the DHT are not added to your chain.
They're stored separately.
They're in a DHT cache. They're not yours. You're not the author of those things. This is a really important.
Okay, good. Yeah.
This is a really important thing, I think, because we're used to thinking in terms of global ledgers. The only person who can write things to your chain is you.
That's why it's your chain.
So when the DHT is a separate cache, and it literally at the moment is even a separate database engine that we're using for the key value stores. We're probably going to use the same database engine that we're using for the DHT for your chain as well, but we'll see. At the moment, they're even completely different database engines that are running them. They don't.
Okay. But nevertheless, the entries that I get pushed, that is coming to my node from the DHT, that are
get shared or published to you. Yeah.
Exactly. They are also validated with this function before I continue propagating, distributing them.
Exactly.
Okay. Good. Okay, so what you get here is of course the entry itself and its type and some more information. And then you can do stuff with it and check if it's valid. So for instance, here we are in the rooms zone. So or maybe what I should say is, so this if that we see here is checking for meta tag. So this is telling me if this is coming from a put meta. So this case here is I'm validating a put meta on a room, and this is a normal put on a room. Put or commit rather, right?
Mm-hmm.
So and for instance, what I want to do here is check if the person who is committing a new room entry, so like adding a room, so calling new room. I want to make sure that not everybody is able to do that, only members of my application, so those who have been granted access by the admin. So, and for that, in the validation props, I have sources, and sources array. So these are, so now correct me, Eric, so these are all the authors of this entry, so those who have signed this entry.
Right. and there's usually only going to be one at this stage because we're not doing cross-signing, so that's why it's just 0. And the source would be whoever created it. But if this was one of the a kind of
transaction,
yeah,
like a
where
transfer.
2 people have to sign it before it actually gets committed, you would need to have both sources there. And that's per application, that's application logic. You would know which one would be, like, maybe source 0 would be the initiator and source 2 would be the receiver. You would know that as an application developer, and maybe source 3 is the notary, right?
So this is, by the way, something where we are not yet exactly modeling what Rails is doing, because this is in the controller. In Rails, you would have a validates valid member thing in the model.
Sure.
So this would be maybe something to think about if this could be.
Well, so now that's an interesting point, because in the model side, we are doing some validation that's
Right.
automatic.
Right.
In that when you put in a schema of your entry, that schema gets validated against the data before your validation routine even gets called. So this is more like content validation, not structure validation, business logic validation, not structural validation, which is a reason for it not being in the model. Maybe.
Yeah. Well, you're saying this corresponds to the model, to the Rails model, but it's only structure. You can't have code in here, right?
Right.
So it's pretty different from a Rails model in that way. Right.
Yeah, that's what I just wanted to point out. Yeah. And I'm already fantasizing about maybe changing that.
Yeah. Well, maybe. I mean, if you wanted to, could you have a zone for every model in addition to the schema file? I don't know if you want to. Could you?
So part of the reason why this is not high on the agenda for us is that when we get to using our semantic trees as our semantic tree engine, that stuff, it's fully done in the definition space, and it's got tons of code in there, and it reduces and all of the entities are actually, they've got lots and lots of intelligence in them. So we would rather provide that as the space for where you do this stuff than work on writing all this code. And it's fine if other people want to, that'd be great.
Yeah,
but we're gonna produce a really cool way of doing that with the semantic trees as the engine.
One thing, I mean, we've made references to it, but I'm not sure we've made explicit what the underlying engine validates for you without you needing to validate in your function. Did you already say that?
I did at one point, but you can.
No, I didn't.
Go ahead.
So, yeah, go ahead. If you want.
Okay, you basically. So this schema is being checked against automatically. So this is also where, I guess, why basically you have this connection between the schemas, you register a type here for a zone.
But even before it validates
for an
the
entry,
schema,
in that case,
we do the cryptographic validation. We check the signature, and we should be, but we're not yet checking that it's in your header chain of entries of the source chain. So those should happen below the level of your application. So the cryptography part is just happening for you.
Makes sense.
And then the schema happens for you, and then the logic happens in your app.
Okay.
Cool. So
maybe last point, the tests.
yes.
So we have a few test files here, also named according the models that we got here. And those are JSON files, and they need to be an array, and every entry is one step of the test. So the test suite executes these files in a pseudo-random, undefined ordering. But one test file, so the lines in one test file are executed consecutively. And so what you do here, so this is basically one line is
you
one.
You can break that up. I mean, we could reform. Can you like format that and just grab it and just like reformat it to pretty?
Yeah, right. Actually. Yeah.
Does Adam have a make pretty?
Shift Command P beautify.
Shift Command P.
Beautifully.
Uh-oh.
I haven't installed it, so I was just switching to Atom. So how do I install it? Packages.
Getting a mic editor. I wonder if there's a good way for me to get it.
But maybe I just quickly do it manually.
Just on one anyway, so that you can see what one looks like.
Okay, so this is basically one Zome function call. So you name a Zome and a function name. So this needs to be a function that is exposed. So this is very similar to emulating a UI action. And then you give it an input and you expect an output or you expect an error. Though the expecting of an error is not really working yet.
Really?
Yeah, I tried that and I didn't see easily why it didn't work, but so
it's possible because I was monkeying with that code last night. But.
So the error is the error is also put out as an output. So which you see here. So here in the first function, I'm expecting it to fail because I'm not providing the room attribute for the message. So which I had to put here output. It should go into error. So so this is very basic. There are two more things that are maybe interesting.
I get that.
Huh?
I see why it did that. Okay.
So if we look at this.
Oh yeah, do the R. Are you going to do the R2 and the H?
Yeah.
There's a couple things, yeah, but.
I pasted the full pretty thing into Slack as well.
Oh, okay.
Thanks. Very nice.
Okay. So in this, well, let's take this one first now. Oh yeah. Well, so in this case, I'm creating a message and I'm expecting it to work. So and what new message will return if it works is the hash of this new object, and the hash of this newly created object is accessible here with this %h% or string.
Yeah, and that'll be the top of
the last hash that was committed.
The most recent entry hash on your chain, right?
Yeah, and this stuff is not documented. And we'll actually, this will probably change quickly, but we'll be documenting that stuff and giving the things that are available inside the test framework. Because there's another thing that Nico added, which I think is really cool, that's very useful too.
Maybe I missed it, but what's the %R1?
That's what is really cool.
That's what I will explain now. So if you look at this test setup, so I'm first testing, I'm trying to add a message without a room, which should not work. And then I'm listing all messages where I should get none. And then I'm first creating a room so that I'm able to add a message here successfully. But in order to do so, I need the hash of the room. So if this would be code, I would just save this in a variable and use it here. So, and this is what I can do here with this R1. So we have R1, R2, and R3, which are the results of the last line or the last test, and the one before and the one before that.
Sort of rolling.
Exactly. So here it is R2 because it's the result of the test that is 2 steps back. So this is also something where maybe a bit more,
work could be done.
Yeah, so a bit more flexible thing. So actually maybe really code.
Yeah.
But this is what we got right now.
So it lets you build tests on prior tests, so you can advance. Yeah.
So it's interesting that there's a lot of JSON as strings. I wonder if the JSON could be as JSON.
You mean inside here?
Yeah. Just a thought, maybe.
Yeah, it's a really interesting question, but there's a generality problem with this, in that you don't know what your function is going to return.
Yeah,
The function can return lots of different stuff.
but you can represent just about everything in JSON.
Yeah, but
Again, it's not all in JavaScript. You're gonna force the list system to generate JSON for its output.
Every language in the world reads and writes JSON.
so we could.
Okay.
There's more thinking to figure out how to do that in the test environment.
It's just a side thought.
Yeah, no, it's a really interesting question about it, because also I'm not quite sure what we'll do in the case of once we have symmetric trees. Like maybe we would actually want to have this all go into that, but I'm not sure. I think there's actually some interesting complexity in terms of this whole thinking about that, but yeah, sure. It's a good idea.
I would rather put the effort in adding a Ruby engine and have the tests as Ruby files.
Nice.
Right. Or in fact, actually, it would be nice if the tests could be in whatever language you wanted, right? So I just did this as my very quick way of getting tests going on us, and we probably ought to have the test files be, instead of, if it says JSON, then it's going to look like this, but if it says Ruby, it's Ruby, and it actually runs inside the whole system. So, and same with JavaScript. You could actually have JavaScript files running it.
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, that's basically it for this example.
Thanks for the tour.
Holochain.
I get Holochain.
Any
Ooh.
questions from out in the
Yeah.
larger world?
Yeah, let's gather questions, and then actually what I want to do is break into work groups of like what we're going to build and what kind of, how we want to use the space and that type of stuff. But let's get questions from Asheville and Vancouver. And has Ashlyn joined the dev channel?
Asheville is on the, I don't know about Asheville. Judd is on.
No, Ashland. I
Oh,
was saying.
Ashland. Okay.
So we don't have circuit youth up.
No. It snowed. They couldn't go to it.
It's snow.
It's a snow day.
I didn't get your name.
Oh, my name is Alex.
Alex.
Hey.
Hi. Good pleasure. Glad you're here. Sure.
Alex shows up at all the interesting events.
Alex is the blockchain lead at
Oh, that's
Institute for
right.
the Future.
Okay.
Mhm.
Now I'm connecting. I remember your name now.
Yeah,
Okay.
I'm not a programmer, but I'm definitely happy to provide just some ideas or just
Awesome.
follow along and help out wherever I can.
Great. Well, good to have you here.
Thank
So we're getting,
Let me see. Are we getting stuff on the Slack channel?
Judd, I haven't been able to follow closely. Pulling car from stream. Uh-oh.
Oh, wow. That's so good. I assume that's not like a programming lingo that I'm not familiar with.
No, it's not.
I'm assuming that he's driving in snowy conditions and.
Unless that's a Lisp reference, but I don't think so.
Yeah, maybe he means from the live stream. Handbrake wasn't set.
Ouch.
Handbrake wasn't sent. Probably not the live stream.
No.
This is not a metaphor.
I think there's a tool called Handbrake out there.
So, yes, we want questions specific to building apps. And, oh wait, hey Hayes, can you join the hackathon channel, the Holochain Hackathon channel, and post the questions in there? Here, let me just give you the link.
You can also just talk and we can unmute you because we can hear you if you want.
Is that machine muted?
Yeah, you,
Oh, no, maybe he
No,
muted
yeah.
himself. Just
He
unmute
muted
yourself and talk. We'll hear you.
16.
I have a couple of questions. Actually, I have a couple of questions about how the actual development process should work. So I've been working on the UI for the chat app for a few days here. And it's challenging to develop for an API that doesn't exist yet, or that you have to blow away and rebuild periodically to get an update for. And I wonder if it's going to be an effective workflow to set up like an API stubbing kind of platform for projects. I mean, I wonder if you guys have any opinions on what the workflow is.
Well, one thing that we were scheming about, this isn't a direct answer to that question about API stubbing. Let Eric field that one. But one thing that we were talking about doing is having something generate a UI for all of the things that you've defined just automatically, using the JSON schemas to generate HTML fields and all that kind of stuff, so that you could interact with the things as you've built them in the, I mean, we can do tests to do that, but you can also interactively do that. And that may help with some of the development. And then you could even potentially lift some of those things from the auto-generated thing into your custom space.
But this actually speaks really well to the question you're asking about the API stubbing, because like when you do Rails scaffold, you have to type in like what the different things you want to scaffold around, right? I haven't done this in a long time, but you basically type in like I want this. You do a scaffold and it generates for you the models and the controllers and all the rest of the stuff. But you name the kind of fields that you want, and it even generates the what do you call it, the migration. I think that's the level that we're talking about that we would like to do. You could do scaffold on a function with its entries that then become you get the UI for, and the beginning UI for, and the beginning entries for. Act as that. That sounds like a fun project. Maybe we can get something like that rolling by the end of the hackathon. I'll work on that.
Judd just uploaded a picture of his car in the stream. Yikes.
Wow.
Oh, sorry, Judd.
Sorry, Judd. Wow,
Oh,
that's a really thing. It's on.
Oh, it's on the thing there. Even better.
Oh.
Wow.
Okay.
Well, at least there's not going to be that much water damage.
It starts to pour. Good thing it wasn't a smart car.
Well, we appreciate that you're following along anyway.
On a smartphone, out in the woods. That's awesome.
I think it's just.
Look at I love the boom, boom, boom. That's really great.
I like the lag.
We can just play with this all day.
Okay.
Can I ask a second question that's not strictly related to developing apps?
Yeah.
How difficult is it to implement interpreters for other languages?
Well, if you've got if you've got a library, a Go library, like we have for both Lisp and JavaScript, it's very easy. It took me half a day at most to get the JavaScript one running, basically simply by copying everything that I had done with the Lisp one and replacing it. And most of the time was spent in getting the tests to all work and match over. Actually doing it would be easier, but I made a duplicate copy of all my tests so that every single one of the functions that are exposed, like commit and property and all the rest, also are tested in JavaScript. And now it does make it a pain, because now every time I add a new function, I've got to do it for both languages and update the tests for both languages. But I think it's worth it. So that being said, I expect it to be quite a bit more. No, so if I have my virtual machine environment for semantic trees running, and that works, and you can do stuff in it, well, it's going to be just as easy to make that one run inside of Holochain as any of the other ones are. But writing a virtual machine for a scripting language, that's sort of up to you. I know that Nico was talking about popping in Ruby, because there's a small Ruby interpreter there.
That's Ruby. Yeah. So you see here, that's why I opened it. The jsnucleus.go file is 380 lines of code. So that's the JavaScript code plugin.
And in fact, actually, I have a ticket to refactor a bunch of stuff that should be moved out of the nucleus, the specific nucleus code, and into the general nucleus code for doing like argument checking. There's a bunch of refactoring that'll make this a lot smaller. And third time's always the charm, right? You do your refactor when you use something the third time, not the second time.
So should we talk about the projects we actually want to build?
Yeah.
Is that what we're ready to do now? So the things that we have loosely in progress are like this clutter thing, which I think
oh, we should just actually get the UI for that up.
Yeah, you should pull it up.
Can you?
You
should actually just be able to like make
to load the.
You should be able to do if you do HC clone. Examples. Oh, I don't know where you are. Okay. Now just serve it.
No gen?
Nah, it doesn't even matter at this point. Okay, now go look at it.
I mean,
314. Is it working? Yeah, there you go. Now, of course, this doesn't do anything yet. It's not connected up. It doesn't do calls, but I would actually like to work on that today. Unless somebody else wants to work on actually generating the JavaScript in the UI to come in.
So having a distributed Twitter just as a thing to play with, right? Like there's no central server. You just broadcast and you can follow each other, and it's sort of like secure scuttlebutt light, but without the end-to-end encryption at this stage.
And definitely you need to join the Meowvolution.
Yes.
And you have to hear Anders' vision for all of the commercials. For
the credit for this goes to Anders. He did this. It's beautiful. You see, and this down here is exactly what happens to the Twitter bird on.
According to Anders.
Yeah, he wants to find one with a blue bird in his mouth.
Yeah.
So everybody stores all of the tweets?
It's a pasted image in there. I thought it was a cat with a. I am not allowed to bite myself.
Oh no!
You would not need to store all the tweets. It all depends on how the sharding is set up.
Like in this example or whatever. I mean.
To start with, yeah, because to start with, what this is going to be is it's a Twitter between a group of people who are running this Twitter, right? It's club. Mm-hmm. So storing all the tweets is not a big deal. In fact, actually, if you think about how little of a deal it is, it's hilarious.
Right. Tweets are pretty small.
Yeah.
And especially if you.
So what is the main difference with this and Twitter? Like what would be a highlight of why?
It's
distributed, only it's distributed.
Well, one thing that's interesting here, though, is
it's like it's distributed, only it's distributed. Sorry.
If I'm following Art, but I'm not following Eric,
right?
Am I seeing in this version of Clutter? Am I still seeing Eric's stuff if he's participating in that community?
What do you mean by seeing? Do you mean in the UI?
Is it showing up in my UI?
No. Because the UI would be set not to do that.
Your UI would be just the people you're following.
Right.
Is it showing up in your DHT?
Yeah.
Is a different question.
Sure.
And that is going to be determined by how the neighborhooding is set up in the DHT.
Yeah.
So if we were really trying to chase Twitter and have hundreds of millions of users or whatever.
Yeah.
Billions. How many Twitter users are there? Anybody?
Let's say millions. Not billions.
Less than a billion. All right. Anyway.
How many?
Millions of millions, I think.
Yeah.
Then you would do a lot of neighborhooding, and your DHT would be holding some random people's stuff that you don't even know,
Right.
but you're not looking at that.
Yeah.
Now, another thing that we would want to implement and haven't is like one of the types of holochains I would like to build is essentially a content delivery network. Essentially, it's a caching type system that moves things to your local DHT if they are best served from there, meaning if you're using them frequently and that kind of stuff. Also, just smart caching in the DHT would be good for us to build. We haven't built any of that. But you obviously keep anything you've ever written because it's in your chain.
Yeah.
So I think that's actually one of the things to underscore is the posse thing. This is built-in posse. It's built-in publish on self, syndicate elsewhere, right? So to me, this is one of the things about creating new shared spaces is you always keep what you've created. You never have to worry about losing that. And then what's the additional marginal overhead that you're carrying to make the system, to provide the resiliency for the system? Because you don't want to only be able to access things when the author's chain is online. Typically, you want to have enough additional copies. So if you think about like running something like Wikipedia in a fully distributed manner, and you modify MediaWiki a little so that it's not actually just loading a full page, but just like, you know, how you can edit sections. If you actually made the sections into hashes such that when you load a page, you get a list of hashes and you're loading that from bunches of peers, from dozens of peers. It's not a central load on any one place.
Yeah.
You would, I looked it up, how many pages are there in Wikipedia? There's like 400, 500,000 or something like that. And there's, you know, many millions of users. So if everybody ran a peered Wikipedia and you hosted 3 to 5 pages, you'd have thousands of duplicate copies online all the time. And so hosting 3 to 5 pages isn't a big deal. You know, like that's nothing. And you could run that on almost any peer. It's lightweight enough to put on a phone, you know.
So would the cryptocurrency, like, so if you were to create a system for incentivizing people to hold those in their cash or whatever, that could be like, would the currency side of that might be like a zone or something like that, like one sub part of a major program?
Exactly. You could have, it's our intention in our strategic development path to move to having a distributed application hosting ecosystem and have a cryptocurrency for that.
But those are separable, right?
I don't know which of those are that.
Oh, so like, well, so like the files storage is already how this kind of works, and you could do that without a cryptocurrency. But if you wanted to provide that incentive model,
yeah. So like MadeSafe does MadeSafe coin and that kind of thing. Yeah, but what we're looking at is it really more for applications, for running stuff. Yes, it will also hold data, but it's really for live peer-to-peer applications. So that suppose you want to launch an Uber without the company in the middle or an Airbnb without the company in the middle, you know, part of what we'd be doing with our distributed application currency is trying to host a Amazon cloud hosting without the data center in the middle, right? Being able to do edge hosting where you're earning credits as if it's like Bitcoin mining, except instead of it being useless computation being thrown away every 10 minutes,
right,
it's actually if you think of it a little bit like Tor, where you can tune how much bandwidth you want to share, you know, you could tune how much CPU, bandwidth, storage you want to allocate to sharing for distributed application hosting, and basically be incentivized to be sharing that infrastructure.
that's kind of similar to what like Golem's doing with their kind of cryptocurrency system.
I don't remember. I actually have seen it, but I don't remember.
Okay, for sure.
Just a comment on MadeSafe. They try to keep 4 copies of everything online at a time, and it's a self-balancing network, right? So if some nodes go down, they replicate the data to other nodes.
Yeah.
How are they?
We see doing that kind of through the neighborhooding algorithm, which we haven't written all of yet, but like such that neighborhoods basically are managing their resilience and uptime, and that if we do it right, the idea is that as a clutter grows from 10 users to 10,000 to 10 million or whatever, that your neighborhoods get smaller and smaller percentage-wise of the.
Sure.
It shards into smaller and smaller pieces with a different hash mask. And
Yeah, I believe MaidSafe also does a neighborhood concept for the same thing.
cool.
How is there awareness that a particular node has gone down propagated?
I don't know.
There are systems that do checks, like where they'll ping you randomly, and it's like a proof of holding that file or whatever.
Right, that's how you earn Filecoin too. Proof
it-
of retrievability.
Yeah. In our system, it would, in base Holochain, not going all the way to the Scepter Fuel thing yet. In the base Holochain system, it's through the DHT gossip protocols that you're actually tracking which of the peers in your cluster neighborhood are available.
So this is clutter. What else we got in terms of projects?
The chat, the Slack, distributed Slack, the central server
Holochain.
Do we
chat.
have a picture of that?
It doesn't have a UI yet.
It's Haze maybe has
Hayes has
some
been
UI,
working on the UI. It looks just like Slack.
We could put up Slack.
That's what I read. It didn't.
No. The UI that Hayes has copied from an open source Phoenix-based thing. And did you look at that?
Is it in a branch?
It's not
No,
in
the
Holochain
UI
branch.
the UI is not.
I
It's
can
there's
give
a
you a link to the
Yeah.
repo.
it hasn't been compiled down to a single file that can be served off of the UI directory. Because basically HC is a micro web server that serves anything that you put in your UI directory. And so
we
it needs,
talked about that.
right.
And the FN and the post, and we should probably talk about that really briefly.
You guys like your public directory in Rails. Sort of.
Yeah.
Exactly. It's exactly like that. Except that there's one route, which is FN/, which actually, if you post to it, it runs the functions that are exposed. And there's also a WebSocket that you can attach to. It's /socket, and then you can do the same thing. You can put a function on the WebSocket, and then it'll run it that way and pull it back.
What if project idea was? Should we just share things that we're thinking of? Or?
Yeah.
Like, so you kept talking about like the term neighborhooding in a technical sense, but like you could do like a decentralized Nextdoor. It's like a neighborhood chat app. If that was like an application to this, that could be more obvious.
Nextdoor?
Yeah, so it's like like your private neighborhood chat.
Nextdoor is a very popular like local social network where like you have your whatever Sunset or Eastern Sunset neighborhood or something like that.
Well,
it was amazing.
Clutter would be perfect for that.
Yeah.
You just do Clutter and
Or the Holochat.
or Holochat.
Yeah, it would
Same
basically be a rebranding, but also maybe you could even host files like local like pollution data or something like that and that kind of stuff, and just allow that to be usable and checkable by many people. Maybe even with like an IoT backend or something where you could pull sensor data from anything and host it.
Cool. That sounds like fun.
So, but yeah, talking about real geographical neighborhoods.
Or I mean, you could have a diaspora if someone still cares about it and they still want to contribute to it. You could have like a governance system on it. So chat, governance, and like some kind of administrative thing where you could turn things on and off or share permissions to places or something.
Yeah, part of what becomes interesting to me is how do you manage the social membrane of that stuff, and do you want to? How exclusive does a neighborhood want to be to say, this is really only for people in our neighborhood. This isn't for spectators who want to just spy in our neighborhood and criticize the things we do, or whatever.
Yeah, maybe you have to meet in person and exchange a key.
Exactly. You
Right.
meet down at the
Yeah,
corner.
exactly.
You meet down at the corner coffee shop, and you get little, cards from people. You pick one up at the corner.
You actually have to type in the hash.
But you could have like 3 attestations from your neighbors or something, or like you have to bring like proof of your property or something.
There's 2 things I'm looking at working on today. One is an integration with CoMakery, which assigns sort of project coins, equity in your projects. So we're already writing CoMakery awards to the Ethereum blockchain, and looking at doing a proof of concept integration with Holochain, which should be relatively easy because we're sending very little data, like to Ethereum would be sending just a bit of data to Holochain. The other sort of more juicy thing is integration with Trust Exchange, which is essentially the same as the portable reputation toolkit that we were working on at Rebooting Web of Trust, which writes signed JSON LD claims about ratings, reviews, trust information. And so that's already writing to IPFS, and so writing a copy of that to a Holochain, maybe a Holochain or maybe a Holochain. I don't know how we would think about. We'd probably start with one Holochain.
Yoo-hoo.
Well, I would like to. I would like to finish the chat example first, but I would also really like to start working on integrating the not so extensive but already existing home code with Holochain. So, and maybe reach the point that we have at least something like a very basic NumMap clone on Holochain distributed, so that you can create holons and just see them and edit them collaboratively.
And is that Node.js?
Sorry?
Is that in Node.js? The little bit of existing home code? Just wondering the language.
So that was, I mean, we were meant, we were targeting Ethereum and IPFS. And what I did so far was writing a Rails backend, which is just mocking IPFS and Ethereum. Cool. So that I have like an interface where I can also put a hash or put an object and get a hash. And that's what I would like to rebuild in Holochain. And then have something like a basic, maybe that could even be like a module, like Holospace or something, like a file system like, well, consensus layer maybe, or I mean, where we can register holons or files and give it a name. So just like a distributed file system.
Nice.
What if you had a decentralized like local Bitcoins? So you could, it doesn't actually do the brokering of like Bitcoin transactions, but you could find people near you that have like cryptocurrencies that you want to buy. Could be another thing.
I like the idea. I keep coming across the idea of like, so this is kind of, because you've got the verification, right? It's something more directly human. So taking, for example, if you don't say anything for more than a day and a half, then I was just thinking about this now, then the text you write, it just gets smaller and smaller and smaller. You have to write like whole paragraphs in order to get it to get bigger. But if you just maintain like a gentle, normal contact with people, then you stay. It's quite easy to do. Quite a few people I think that would help out.
It's kind of like going off into the distance.
Yeah, you can literally see your
further and further
conversation,
away.
your relationships, the threads wearing thin.
Yeah, so this I'm going to bite my ass and say that thing actually works. If it doesn't, then you tell me. I think it does. There's logs as well, so maybe I'll push them out if anyone wants to use it.
What is that thing again?
It's a space where, depending on what happens, it depends who turns up, because there is like, it's quite a hefty effort still to punch through until IP version 6 is everywhere. It's quite a hefty effort to actually. It's not just it's not just a trivial thing to connect directly with people all over the world. There's useful services. Twilio have got a really good service for it. So we still need to integrate that. So if people are wanting to actually, so it may happen that people wanting to work with each other, it will just be much easier to work on a central server. So in fact, obviously there's been the odd glare saying central server. Obviously the point is that the things themselves are still utterly separated from each other. It's just they don't need to punch through NAT to chat.
No, I wasn't responding to you when I made the motion. I was actually going to say, let's check in with Asheville and Vancouver on projects that they want to do. So Hayes is saying he wants to share the Slack clone. Can we Do you want to project something, Hayes, or no?
No, I'm not worried about that. I was just gonna say really quickly, shall I just say?
Yep.
So yeah, I've been working on the Slack clone with Nico. He, as of today, it seems like we have backend to play with. So now the real work on the client can happen. And if there's anybody out there in this hackathon who is proficient or who's interested, and especially if somebody who's proficient in React, it's actually in Vue, but Vue's currently React or Vue, they're pretty similar. It would be great to have some help on the front end, and Nico, look forward to continuing to work with you on the back end.
Is it possible for this sorry, this is a naive question, but is it possible for like this chat app kind of stuff to be for you to participate on an iOS app?
I looked up, there's some way of making Go stuff for Android and iOS, but we haven't tried that yet. Because I'm thinking about, like, you know how Fire Chat allowed people to relay messages in protest situations without censorship? The one thing about that was that it wasn't private, or you couldn't like prevent people from near you. So like if you could dynamically create neighborhoods with people around you and then have an open channel with them, that'd be pretty cool. Like on mobile.
I actually invited Misha and OVL, who was the CEO of Open Garden, and also did Fire Chat.
It'll be really fun to get to that.
Yeah, that'd be awesome.
Where you attach to the radio instead of attached to IP.
Right. The radio.
Because what you're talking about is attaching not to the internet protocol. You want to attach to the Wi-Fi protocol or the radio directly.
Right.
Then that would be really great.
It'd be awesome. I'm just thinking about situations in which this actually is like critical, you know.
Yeah.
I'll call Misha and see if he's in town and might be able to swing by for a part of the hackathon.
Right now, I think we're pretty far away from the ad hoc usability of like just install the app on, you know.
Yeah. That makes sense.
But because we're in the prototype phase, but we for sure want to get it there.
Right.
That would
There's
be
a-
one that, what?
There's a question online.
And
Yeah. What's the question?
I lost it.
what other
Is it
from Judd?
Well,
No.
So while you're looking, the Holochat app the action is happening in this like shared code workspace under an Art Brock namespace. Is that right? I'm asking. Like,
What?
is it like the code is not in Git, but it's in some shared code online thing?
Oh, no, the one that
that's-
Hayes made is under his user ID. He's basically taken a UI for a Slack-alike that's literally looks just like Slack to run on a Phoenix Elixir backend, and he is now tailoring it to run on a Holochain backend.
Okay.
And so he's basically just migrated that app, that repo. He forked that repo and is messing around with it in his system. I can give you a link to it.
Sure.
Hayes can share a link.
Okay, I got the question.
Sure. Just pop it in the.
If anyone wants to be a part of that, there's a Slack, there's a Holochain app channel, and that's a good place to talk to me, and I'd love to get people involved. I'd be happy to give sort of like a guided tour of how the Slack clone works and all the work that has currently been done to make it talk through the Holochain backend. And people can just ping me about that in Slack or some other way.
Great, and maybe just pin the repo link to that channel, unless we have another way of organizing
I
that.
just also pasted it into the hackathon channel.
Thanks.
Just a warning, they're doing street cleaning shortly here.
There's a question on Twitter. Should I?
Is that a parking violation warning?
Yeah, $70.
Oh,
tickets.
It's not both sides. It's on the west side and the north side.
Only
I
one
didn't
side
look
of
at my
the street.
sign.
I think I might be legally.
Which north side of the east-west streets and west side of the north-south streets?
Why don't
you
I'm on that street on
Do
that
it.
side.
Just get collect all the keys.
Okay.
Then you probably need to know.
Look.
Actually, good looking.
Alright, well, this
I think you're
looks like
okay.
a transition slowly.
Yes.
Uh,
I don't know.
70 quid. We need to say.
I'm listening.
From Twitter, it says Holochain, does that mean I could dedicate e-link resources on my platform to serve applications in my communities?
What was the thing, dedicate what resources?
Does e-link,
Oh, idling resources,
Idling.
sorry, yeah. Yeah, that is the plan for
How'd it
it,
go?
especially when we hit the distributed app,
Good.
like infrastructure phase. But that's when you could dedicate the idle resources. And for any apps that get built, like if we build a distributed Wikipedia or whatever, and you just want to do that for fun, you
broadcasting.
can dedicate idle resources. And you should know, Christian, that you're talking right over the mic. Just so you know.
Yeah. And it's recording.
Live streaming.
What?
Live streaming.
Christian, we're live streaming. I'm trying to answer somebody's question that's on the live stream. It's okay, just so you know. It just makes it harder for them to hear you.
We're gonna crash the party.
so you said yes, that is the platform when we get to our distributed app interface?
Right, because so far we don't have like incentives to reward you with for doing that. But if you want to find, just need other nodes, and you want to be a node on them to share hosting capacity, awesome. But just when we get the Scepter Fuel in place, then you'll be rewarded for kind of the mining by sharing that infrastructure. And I just wanted to check in. I'm not sure if Judd is still listening in. I'm going to actually ask him if there's anything that he wants to work on or any projects he wants to connect to. And then Nicholas, I haven't heard anything from Vancouver, if you guys want to chime in. Nicholas, you there?
Robert Bennett said something about survey voting, type thing. I'm not sure what that was.
Survey.
A while ago. Okay.
Yeah, distributed Lumio would be great, right? That kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Some of the workflow and I don't know, Hayes, are they not in the chat room? You're connected. You're not there. Over here, it looks like, oh, who's in there? That's Judd that's in there, right? Yeah, okay. I don't know, maybe they're watching the live stream.
I'm making a lot more progress. We're still some frustrating.
Still chasing truth. Really.
Okay, Nicholas just signed off. Any projects happening there? Or ones I'd like to jump in on?
Something amazing.
Well, you're good at like jQuery and stuff, right? I think it'd help accelerate our progress by orders of magnitude. I want to set up a library thing. That's pretty cool. where you
Did
can
we
show
finish
your-
the stream or should we?
We should
Just
probably
say
finish the
hello,
stream.
goodbye, and
Um,
thank you.
Distributed file storage.
Yeah, so it sounds like in Vancouver, they're saying
But
that
combine it also with,
the
Forms
run
and
through was
procedures.
good, useful. It's triggered more interest and understanding, but there's nobody gonna be coding there today. There's some good conversation going on. They're not gonna be building a project right now in Vancouver. But let us know if that changes, Nicholas. And then, yeah, I think we can end the live stream.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, everyone. And we will be posting this online very, very soon. Thank you.